Most Canadian homeowners who shop for home insurance use one of two methods. They call their current broker and accept whatever quote comes back, or they go online and use a comparison tool. The second option is faster and in many cases produces a better result. But not all comparison tools work the same way, and knowing the difference matters before you enter your information. I've spent nearly a decade as an insurance underwriting analyst in the Canadian insurance industry. In this video, I'm reviewing the 4 most widely used home insurance comparison options available to Canadian homeowners, what each one does, how each one generates quotes, and which type of homeowner gets the most value from each. Before I get into the tools, one framing point. A comparison tool is not the same as an insurance broker, and it is not the same as going directly to an insurer. Each of those 3 channels has different incentives, different data access, and different output. The right channel depends on your property, your claims history, and what you're optimizing for. I'll come back to this at the end. The 4 options I'm reviewing are RATEHUB, Insurance Hotline, Sonnet, and Square One. All 4 let Canadian homeowners start the quote process online, but they do not all work the same way. RATEHUB is one of the best-known home insurance comparison platforms in Canada. When you enter your property details, RATEHUB sends your information to multiple insurance providers simultaneously and returns competing quotes in a single view. The key advantage is that you can see multiple providers side by side without having to enter your information 4 separate times. RATEHUB works with a network of insurers and brokers, meaning some quotes come directly from insurers and some come through broker partners who then contact you to finalize the policy. The comparison is free. RATEHUB earns a referral fee if you proceed with a provider through their platform. That fee is paid by the provider, not by you. For most Canadian homeowners looking to compare renewal rates quickly, RATEHUB is the most efficient starting point. The link is in the description. One thing worth understanding: the quotes returned are not always final binding rates. Some may change slightly when the insurer receives your full application details. The quote gives you a directional read on the market. The final rate is confirmed at binding. That is standard across all comparison platforms, not specific to RATEHUB. Insurance Hotline is a comparison platform that operates similarly to RATEHUB. You enter property details. It returns multiple quotes. The insurer and broker network is partially overlapping with RATEHUB and partially distinct. If you use both, you may see some of the same providers and some different ones. Insurance Hotline is useful as a secondary check after running RATEHUB, particularly if your property has characteristics that attract specialist insurers rather than mainstream providers. One practical note on using multiple comparison platforms: the quotes you receive are based on the information you enter. If you enter slightly different details on 2 platforms, or if one platform's questions prompt you to think more carefully about your claims history, you may get different results. The comparison is only as accurate as the information you provide. Take 5 minutes before starting to pull out your current policy documents and have your claims history ready. That preparation makes the comparison meaningful rather than approximate. Sonnet is a direct-to-consumer insurer, not a comparison platform. You go to Sonnet specifically to get a Sonnet quote. You are not comparing multiple providers. Sonnet is a Canadian company and part of one of Canada's largest property and casualty insurance groups. The advantage of Sonnet is speed and simplicity. The online quote process is fast, and there is no broker intermediary. The limitation is that you are getting one quote from one insurer. Sonnet is worth checking if you want a direct insurer quote to use as a benchmark against what your broker or a comparison platform has found. It is not a replacement for a multi-insurer comparison. Square One is also a direct-to-consumer insurer, not a comparison platform. Square One is a Canadian company focused specifically on home insurance, and it has built a reputation for covering properties that mainstream insurers sometimes decline: older homes, strata units, properties with non-standard features. If your property has been flagged by a mainstream insurer or you've received a non-renewal notice, Square One is worth contacting directly. The online quote process is clean and fast. Like Sonnet, you are getting a single quote, not a comparison. So how do these four options fit together? Here is my assessment after nearly a decade looking at how insurers price risk. For a standard property built after 1980, updated systems, no recent claims, owner occupied. RATEHUB is the right first stop. You'll get multiple quotes in one session, and you can see where your current insurer sits relative to the market. For a non-standard property, older construction, claims history, oil tank, knob, and tube wiring, the comparison platforms are less useful, because mainstream insurers often decline these risks through automated quote systems. In that case, Square One is worth a direct quote, and a broker who specializes in non-standard risk is a better starting point than any online comparison tool. The one thing comparison tools cannot do is negotiate. A broker can go back to an insurer and ask for a rating exception on a specific property. A comparison tool returns what the algorithm produces. If your property has characteristics that make it borderline for standard coverage, that human negotiation step matters. There is also a timing consideration that most homeowners miss. The best time to run a comparison is 4 to 6 weeks before your renewal date, not the day the renewal notice arrives. When the renewal notice arrives, your insurer has already set the rate and issued the paperwork. Switching at that point is possible, but more administratively complex. Running the comparison 4 to 6 weeks early gives you time to get competing quotes. Go back to your current insurer with a competing rate if you want to negotiate, and make the switch cleanly before the renewal date if the gap justifies it. If you wait until the renewal notice arrives and the rate has already increased, you are reacting. If you run the comparison early, you are negotiating from a position of choice. 4 things to check before you use any comparison tool. First, have your current policy in front of you, coverage limits, deductible amounts, and endorsements. You cannot do an apples-to-apples comparison if you don't know what you're currently covered for. Second, know your claims history. Comparison tools will ask about prior claims. Having accurate information speeds up the process and avoids quotes that later change at binding. Third, run the comparison before your renewal date, not after. You have the most options when your current policy is still active. Most insurers will not let you switch mid-term without a penalty, so the window to act is before renewal, not after the notice arrives. A fourth consideration worth mentioning: the coverage limits on a comparison quote. When comparison platforms return quotes, they sometimes default to standard coverage limits that may be lower than what you currently have. Before accepting a comparison quote as a genuine saving, confirm that the coverage limits, deductible, and key endorsements match your current policy. A lower premium for lower coverage is not a saving, it is a reduction in protection. Here is the verdict. RATEHUB, recommended for most Canadian homeowners as a starting point for renewal comparison. Insurance Hotline, useful as a secondary check, particularly for properties with specialist characteristics. Sonnet, worth a direct quote for benchmark purposes. Square One, the best option if mainstream insurers are declining your property or if you've received a non-renewal notice. Before you accept your renewal increase, run the comparison. The link is in the description. It takes about 3 minutes. I've also put the free homeowner underwriting checklist in the description. It covers the 6 property risk factors that affect your premium alongside the comparison conversation. If you found this useful, subscribe. I publish one of these every week. Everything I cover comes from nearly a decade of working inside the Canadian insurance industry. Previous videos are linked at the end. See you next week.